got
said.
it's hatted, by the way.
Gibbon hadn't, thank you. So it's, has it? Let us in.
This is Megan's seat, right? Does this look okay? It does? Yeah, the fonts are perfect.
So Allie is going to come in here and the first thing she's going to look at is how straight these seals are. bring everyone out, so be ready to get up there at 1:10. Scott has his right now. I didn't have enough.
Here, we'll just. You want to just put that in here? Or let me
That's what I
just.
was figuring.
Huh? Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, I'll let 2 minutes.
You're fine.
streaming's on.
They're all live.
I think so.
Sit there.
All right, so good afternoon, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mayor Vince Sarah. I'm the mayor here in Brigantine. I'd like to welcome everybody to our Brigantine Community School for our hearing on offshore wind. Before we get started, I really want to send a special thank you to our superintendent, Glenn Robbins, and all of our school staff who really helped to organize this event here at the school. Let's give them a nice round of applause. And I want to thank our Brigantine Police Department, one of the most outstanding police departments. As I said, they are one of the most outstanding police departments in the country, and I'm very, very proud of them. I'd like to introduce some of our elected officials that are here today. We have Assemblywoman Claire Swift. Assemblyman Ken Lefevre. County Commissioner John Risley. County Commissioner June Burns. County Commissioner Rich Days. A little special shout out to our County Commissioner Amy Gatto, who's turning in virtually today. So Amy, thank you. We have the old mayor, Phil Gunther. And of course, my outstanding council team. We have our Deputy Mayor, Karen Bew. Councilman Mike Reardon. Councilman Neil Kane. Councilman Paul Lettieri. Councilman Dennis Haney. I would say this offshore wind issue is probably one of the most important issues that we will ever face on the East Coast. When the information first started to come out on this, what was told to us was not the truth. And we really need to stand up and make sure that we not only protect our sea life, our whales and dolphins, our commercial fishing industry, and our economy. But we need to make sure that we're doing what is right for our country. These projects make absolutely no sense, and even the federal government itself says that they will have little to no impact on global warming. So if it's not saving the planet, we really shouldn't be doing it. Now, I really want to thank Congressman Scott Perry and Congressman Jeff Van Drew for hosting this event and for putting everything together. And a personal thank you on the behalf of the city of Brigantine and myself to Congressman Van Drew. He has been a true champion for South Jersey and a true champion for Brigantine. When we first started this fight, no one believed me about all the issues that were going on. When I told the congressman about it, he shook my hand, he looked me in the eye, and he said, "Vince, I believe you, I'm with you, I'm going to protect everyone along the East Coast," and I am very proud of him. So, Congressman, thank you. All right, for our special guest today, thank you for coming out. We have some amazing expert testimony. Most important thing, become educated, know what's going on, and make sure that we're on a good path. Thank you so much.
Welcome, everybody. It is good to be with you. I wish we were here under different circumstances. I wish we were here because we just wanted to celebrate something, but we're here because we all believe that we have to protect our ocean. I was thinking as I just looked out today, what a beautiful day this is, and what a beautiful ocean we have, what beautiful beaches and bays we have. I mean, this is truly a gift from God. And I got to tell you, and you know me, I'm a blunt person. I say what I think. It's so unbelievably disturbing in New Jersey, and it's not only in New Jersey, for God's sake, it's in the whole country right now. But we have this great and precious gift, and we are willing to squander it over a few people making a whole lot of money, because that's what it's really about. And I know people don't want to say that, but that's the truth. I first of all want to thank everybody for being here, and I certainly want to thank Scott Perry for being here, because he has been now he's from Pennsylvania, but we're going to forgive him because half the people in this room were originally from Pennsylvania. But he's got a lot of folks. He's got a lot of people who live in his communities and live in his counties that come to the New Jersey shore. And beside that, Scott is a person who is an individual of convictions. Now, we probably agree about 90% of the time. And the one thing, though, that I will always say about him is he's there in Congress for the right reasons. He believes in what he's doing. He believes that our country can do better. He believes in America. And he's here today, and it was about a 3-hour ride? 3-hour ride. All worth it. And, yep. And there's not any one person here, quite frankly, that can vote for him. But he's here because he really cares, and we appreciate that.
That's very nice.
Dr. Andy Harris would be here, and if you remember, he was here last time, and I actually did a hearing with him in the Eastern Shore of Maryland. He is extremely supportive. Dr. Harris had an emergency. Everything's okay, but he thought he was going to be able to be here, and he couldn't, and believe me, he wanted to be. It's important that Andy Harris, Dr. Harris, be on our side because he's something in Congress that you call a cardinal. He's one of the cardinals. I know we make things complicated in Congress. God help us. I still don't understand it all. I've been there 6 years, and I think I'm pretty smart. But anyhow, he is a cardinal in appropriations, and particularly been doing work on the Commerce, Justice, and Science Appropriations Bill to ensure everything that we can do, that we want to make sure that these projects are going to be safe before we move forward and viable. We know they're not. So we're trying to get that in that particular appropriations bill. This is the sad part, just to know the state of our country right now in certain ways. We got that in. We got in the bill last year, the appropriations bill for commerce, justice, and science, that before they could move on with any of these wind turbine projects, they would have to have the GAO study come back, which is the government accountability study that we asked for in my office, which was granted, and that study had to be looked at before we did anything. It's just to slow things down and to make sure that we were being safe and doing the right thing. We got it done. We got it in the House bill. We got it voted out of the House. It went over to the Senate, and damn it, it was a bipartisan effort. All the Democrats and some of the Republicans took it out, and that was a real disappointment. We're doing it again. Andy's going to make sure that it gets in there again. We're going to fight to get that in there, and hopefully there'll be some change, and we're going to keep working at it. So he's a good man, and he will be with us in the future. Congressman Chris Smith, to the district north of us in New Jersey, also cares deeply about this issue. I spoke with him this morning. His wife is ill, and he is in the hospital with her, is where he should be. And she's going to be okay, but she's going through, this is a real thing. I mean, she's got some real issues here, and he needs to be with his wife. He is a good man as well. He's a very sincere and good person who obviously loves his wife a great deal. They've been married, I don't even know how many years. God, I think they're getting close to half a century. And so he's there taking care with her. He has a lot of comments for the record, and we're going to put this, I'm going to ask that this be put in the record, that all of his comments are there. Let me say this about the particular area he's focused on, though, and you're going to hear a little bit about it today. All the things that are wrong with wind turbines, and Chris knows them all, but he particularly was focusing on national security. Because what we know, besides everything else, it's going to endanger national security. And if you can get somebody from the Coast Guard or the military in general, the Navy, to speak to you, and they know they're not going to be recorded and they're not going to be punished and they're not going to get in trouble, they'll tell you they're real concerned with radar issues, noise issues, and other issues, that it's a real problem. And he's been focusing on that. He has a lot, the facts, the figures, the numbers, and we're going to enter all his stuff into the record. I'm proud to be associated with him, and you will see him at the next hearing. I have some opening remarks. First of all, I want to welcome everybody again to this. And what we termed it is an examination into offshore wind industrialization. Understand this. This is not the 5 windmills that you see when you come into Atlantic City that the MUA put there. Nothing like it at all. We're talking about hundreds and ultimately thousands of these wind turbines. They're over 1,000 feet tall. It's a whole different thing. They have lubricants and products in them that could be dangerous to the ocean. It's a big deal. It's different. Today's event is third in a series of investigative hearings organized by members of Congress that live in communities affected by offshore wind development. Our first hearing, which I hosted last year in Cape May County, where we discussed the ocean wind offshore wind proposal, and the good news is that project has since been canceled. We won a battle. And I want to thank all of the counties. I want to thank Cape May County, Atlantic County, Ocean County, and other counties. Believe it or not, this is not just a coastal issue. There are counties that are inland. In my district, I have Salem County, Cumberland County, Gloucester County. Many people in all those counties were supportive, particularly Michael Donahue's with us here, the chairman in Cape May County. And I have to say, we're a small county, and some people tell me at the end of the earth, by the way, that's where I live, but we made a lot of noise in Cape May. That really got a lot of attention, and they put their money where their mouth is, involved in lawsuits and others. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate them. Thank you. Our next hearing was hosted by Andy Harris, Congressman Andy Harris in Ocean City, Maryland, and focused on the U.S. Wind project. Now, today's hearing is in Brigantine, as you know, with Congressman Chris Smith was going to be here, Scott Perry is here, and this is a 2-part proposal that we're going to consider 195 wind turbines. These turbines would be 1,048 feet tall, 3 times taller than the turbines you saw driving into Atlantic City. I want everybody to understand that. Those are nothing. They don't count. Nobody cares about them. No big deal. They're not hurting anything. These would be the largest wind turbines in the world. We're going to be an experiment for the world right here at your Jersey Shore. Dozens of these turbines will be highly visible and maybe even audible, particularly in Brigantine. Where's the mayor? And he knows that. Mayor, you've discussed that before. You literally, there's going to be so many of them, they're so tall that even further inland in the county, you're going to be able to hear these things. It's an industrial site being put in our ocean. The Atlantic Shore's lease area was auctioned by the Bureau of Energy Management in 2015. There was no real consultation or environmental review before executing this sale. Let's be clear, we've got powerful forces against us. I'm going to say how it is. The current administration right here in New Jersey wants this no matter what it takes, no matter how much it costs, no matter how much harm it does, as well as the federal administration in Washington. That's the real deal. This is not a partisan issue. This has nothing to do with partisanship. It has to do with loving our environment and loving our ocean. To review what I've learned about offshore wind from these field hearings and my work in Congress, offshore wind turbines structurally create many safety and hazard risks. They are known to affect marine navigation, safety radar used by fishermen and commercial shipping, as well as search and rescue radar used by the Coast Guard, for real. These turbines affect air traffic operations and even affect our nation's missile defense radar. I'm not making this up. People that aren't going to be punished, in other words, they've retired or they're safe, will tell you all of this from the military. Offshore wind turbines are the most expensive form of energy to construct, requiring substantial subsidies from taxpayers. Here's the deal with them, and this is unbelievable. So I'm going to go offline here as I do all the time. I'm terrible at reading speeches. So you, the taxpayers, who break your back working every day, who are fortunate enough to live in southern New Jersey or Pennsylvania, not only do you pay the taxes, but then your tax money is used to subsidize an industry, the wind turbine industry, that's controlled by foreign countries. So this is the deal. You're going to now be beholden to foreign countries for your energy. You're going to need them when we can be energy independent. You now are going to have to pay your tax dollars to give money to these foreign countries' industries, to these wind turbine industries. Your money, the money you work for, instead of doing a million other good things that we could do in this country. And you're going to have to do that. It's going to hurt our fishing industry. And I'm not saying it, the fishermen will you tell it. Why do you think they're suing? Why do you think they're doing everything they can to stop it? We're going to decimate our fishing industry, which is in New Jersey, the 3rd largest industry in the state. But these people don't care. And some of them don't care. You can't blame them. They don't live here. They live in other countries. They're out to make a buck. But we should care. Americans should care. American representatives should care. So you're going to pay more for utility rates. I want people to understand something, and I hope this is reported. Scott, where he lives, because of these projects, is going to pay more in his utility rates. It's not just people who live at the shore. It's wherever you live. These things cost a fortune, and they're not dependable, and they break down a lot, and you're going to hear that more later. And they're going to cost you a lot of money. So, I had a guy come to me a while back, and he said, Jeff, I never go to the shore. He says, I hate to say it, I don't even care about fishing. I don't know why, because it feeds millions upon millions of people. He said, so I don't really care about the issue. I said, hey, how's your utility bill doing? Everybody look at their utility bills lately, by the way? Have they gone up a little bit? It's the policies of this government. It's what's causing it. And we haven't seen nothing yet. Wait till these wind turbines are in place. So I said to him, do you care about your utility costs? Of course I do, Jeff. Man, they're costing a fortune. Well, I said, be prepared for them to go up. A lot. Not a little bit. Not 10%, not 5%. Multiple times. Geometrically, your utility bills are going to go way up. I don't know about you, but the people I know are having a hard time afford paying the current utility bills, afford paying all the things that they need to do, buying food, buying a home. I won't go into all that. And now your utility bills are going to go up a lot. So for a failed experiment, social experiment, we're going to pay more for our utilities, endanger our fishing industry, endanger our shore, endanger our marine mammals. Do all of that, there's no gain. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, I've been around a little while, you know that. I've served, I think, in almost every darn elected office you could serve, starting in township committee in my little town. I have never seen a project as bad as these wind turbines. And I've seen some bad ones. This is the worst thing I've ever seen. And the sad part is there's so much money behind it. It's so damn hard to get the word out. I drive into Atlantic City and there's a lit up billboard. I don't know if anybody see it, you know, pushing the wind turbines. And people don't know. They think they're bucolic little beautiful windmills. It takes so much money to penetrate the psyche and the mind and the understanding of American people. And that's the problem we have. That's why these hearings are important. But we got to get the word out. It's a big deal. I had a lot of other things that I was going to say here, but I think I just kind of summarized most of them. I want to talk about a few of the people that are here today. I already talked about Scott. We are so lucky to have Diane Solomon. She's a former commissioner on the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, and she has guts. Diane Solomon, yes. Diane Solomon's a truth sayer. And she can say the truth because she's not on the board anymore. She's retired. And she's a very distinguished family, by the way. Her husband, and he'll be retiring soon, is on the Supreme Court of the state of New Jersey. Diane loves the state. She loves our ocean. She loves our people. And she's concerned. And that's why she's here. And quite frankly, she gains nothing out of this other than trying to do the right thing. And she was involved in the crafting and approval of power purchasing agreements that structure the relationship between the proposed offshore wind project and ratepayers. She knows what it's going to do. Robert Rand is with us. Also a guy. He's not going to gain anything from this. He's an acoustics engineer, 40 years of acoustics expertise. He's written papers. He's not just some guy we dug up somewhere. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. He has the degrees. He has the expertise in industrial noise control and has conducted several field tests of offshore wind activities, including the surveying and the pile driving. Robert's going to talk about that. Amy Debio is a community leader from guess where? Nantucket. Remember they told us these things are safe. They'll never break. They could be there for decades. Nothing to worry about, nothing to see there. And we saw what happened in Nantucket, and that's nothing. You haven't seen anything yet. Do you know that these wind turbines have never gone through a hurricane? Because in Europe, they don't get hurricanes, they get bad storms, but they don't get hurricanes. God only knows what's going to happen if we get a Cat 3 or any kind of a hurricane, what they're going to do. And this community in Nantucket recently suffered a disaster when a 300-foot wind turbine blade, imagine the size of that blade, shattered into thousands of pieces of fiberglass into the ocean and onto the beach. Slivers of fiberglass. Is that what we want in our ocean? Are you kidding me? I can't believe we're even talking about this, but unfortunately we are. And what has that done to the marine life there? And we saw the pictures. They couldn't hide them, even the media. You saw the guys with hazmat suits on trying to clean up as much as they could when this thing broke apart. And it wasn't even it wasn't a hurricane. It wasn't anything that unusual. And when we've got thousands of them, God knows. Megan Lapp is one of the most knowledgeable, and she is knowledgeable. And by the way, Amy, thank you for being here. Really appreciate you. Megan Lapp is one of the most knowledgeable, and I mean, she is knowledgeable. Now, I don't know how that much knowledge gets in that little frame, but you know what you're talking about, and we appreciate you. And she's been an outspoken critic of offshore wind energy, and she's gone through hell sometimes for it. She's been criticized. Quite frankly, she's been abused by some folks, and she doesn't care. This is Profiles in Courage right here. Look at these 4 people, and you want to see good Americans. And by the way, with Megan, if you think she doesn't accomplish anything, you are dead wrong, because she was the plaintiff in the recent Supreme Court case, which resulted in the overturning of the Chevron deference, which means that, yep. They don't want to talk about it, but without Megan, that wouldn't have happened. And what that meant is regulatory agencies could do whatever they wanted, even if it was over the will of Congress. It's not supposed to be that way. We are supposed to be the ones, just like we work for you, and that's the truth. We work for you. You don't work for us. The regulatory agencies are supposed to work for Congress. We don't work for them. But right now it's screwed up, and a lot of members of Congress don't know that. So here's how the hearing is going to go. We'll continue with opening statements from our other member of Congress, and then hear opening statements from our witnesses. Then we'll have a discussion session with our witnesses to access their perspectives and expertise. We will end with closing statements from Scott and I. I would ask that our audience, I don't even have to ask you guys, you're all good. I think everybody's good. Respectful to our panel. We can't have disruptions. One of the hearings we had some folks that were on the other side of the issue. That's fine. This is America. It's their right. But they just started standing up and yelling. And that isn't necessarily your right. This is a hearing to hear what these experts have to say. So, with that being said, my friend Scott Perry, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't have a lot of prepared remarks. I do want to just tell you I'm pleased to be here with the toughest guy in Congress, Jeff Van Drew, your congressman. The toughest guy in Congress. You don't do the things he did and live through it, especially coming from New Jersey. Let me just say that. My chief of staff is with me. She's from Middlesex, New Jersey. I'm from Pennsylvania. I want to say thank you to the mayor. Thank you to the school district, law enforcement. Thank you to all of you. It's beautiful outside. I just spent a week down the shore last week, which wasn't the best week to pick, but you know, we pick it the year before and you take Pennsylvanians love coming to the Jersey Shore. We love it, and we appreciate what you provide for us. You have a beautiful state. We want to preserve it. There are some people that are saying this issue is about, well, people in New Jersey don't want to do their part. They don't want to look at the wind turbines and so on and so forth. You and I know it's very different than that. There are a few connected folks, elite folks, that are pushing this issue because there's a lot of money involved. The tragedy, the travesty, the insult to injury is it's your money. They're taking your money, spending it on this stuff and forcing you to accept it, and Jeff and I stand in the way, but it's difficult. I've agreed with every position Jeff has taken on this. He has been a leader. He has been the leader in Congress on it. I will tell you, I've taken it a step further. Like, I've offered amendments to defund, boom, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. Just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. But it's a fight. There's a lot of money involved. This has to do with foreign companies dealing with our power in the United States of America. There's a lot of money changing hands. Of course, you know that this has to deal with your ocean-going mammals. You're all lovers of the environment. You live here. You enjoy it. It provides your prosperity. We come from Pennsylvania and other places to see what you have. We love to see the dolphins. We don't get to see whales, but you know, I was just down in Cape May last week and take a boat out and see the whales. It says so right on the boat, but I think there are 350 or thereabouts northern right whales left in the United States of America, and you're going to hear from these folks today about how this is impacting them. This isn't going back to the 1850s when we extincted, or just about extincted, the buffalo on the plains of America. This is happening in 2024 right before our eyes. We don't have to do this. There's no reason to do this. You've got a $40–50 billion economy on the Jersey Shore because people like me come and we spend our money. We want to be here. I just ate down the street here at a great little pirate place down the street here. We had lunch here. It was awesome, right? People were wonderful. I don't know how you get anything done down here in the summertime because you know, you want to head out to the to the beach instead of being in here. But can you imagine people that want to come to your shore, to your home, and be with you as good neighbors and friends and visitors when you've got thousands? And ladies and gentlemen, this thing that happened in Nantucket, this blade coming off, is not a one-off. This happens thousands of times a year with the few that we have now, let alone the ones that your congressman is talking about, the scale of them. thousands of pounds of this stuff floating around in the ocean, washing up on your shore. I think it's going to be devastating to your economy. And then I think your commissioner is going to talk about the rates that you're paying. Not only you, we're all paying these rates because this stuff, this wind technology in the ocean does not support itself financially. It does not compete with the other forms of energy. It is unnecessary. There are, like your congressman said, and he speaks plainly. That's one of the reasons I love him, because I'm just as plain as he is. There's a few people that stand to make a whole lot of money on our backs, and we just can't have it. I'm so privileged. I'm honored to be with you here today. The drive was worth it. We love to be in New Jersey. You got a beautiful place, and we're honored to be here. And I'm honored to stand with your congressman leading this fight on your behalf. God bless you. Let's go.
So, Diane Solomon, our former commissioner of the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, we're proud to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's on. Good afternoon. I am Diane Solomon, a former commissioner on the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities. In fact, I was the only South Jersey commissioner, so they don't have a South Jersey commissioner anymore. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. The Board of Public Utilities is charged with ensuring safe, reliable utility service at reasonable rates. In other words, the board serves as economic regulators. In doing so, they do not make policy about the source of the energy provided, but are required to follow the legislative directives. For the past several years, the board has been considering various proposals for the delivery of electricity using offshore wind. The legislation authorizing offshore wind development requires there be a net benefit to ratepayers for using offshore wind as an energy source. That requires consideration of offshore wind's reliability, safety, environmental attributes, and economic development considerations. Said another way, its benefits need to outweigh the costs. While it is true that offshore wind may be a carbon-free source of energy, its manufacture, construction, installation, and maintenance are not carbon-free. And wind energy is intermittent and does not provide the 24/7 capability needed for reliability. That New Jersey could serve as a hub for offshore wind development could result in positive economic impact, but it is questionable at best if those hopes will ever be realized. The proposals received to date for offshore wind are extremely costly compared to the cost of conventional energy sources. And as we know, one developer has already withdrawn because the state would not provide a subsidy sufficient for them to make a profit. But the board continues to move forward with additional solicitations despite the fact that with each new solicitation, the price for offshore wind has increased, and additional risks for both inflationary costs and costs to bring that energy onshore has been shifted to the ratepayer. I believe that New Jersey deserves a diverse energy portfolio, but no one energy source should make the cost of energy unaffordable for New Jersey ratepayers. It used to be that the function of the Board of Public Utilities was to make sure that energy would be supplied to meet the needs of New Jersey residents in the most cost-effective way. Over the years, the goals have shifted, making the energy supply much less reliable and far more costly. Other countries have spent a great deal of time and money shifting their energy mix to offshore wind and other renewable sources. For them, the cost of electricity is prohibitive, and they experience times when electric service is not available. In the United States, California has experienced similar difficulties. Renewable energy is important, and as technology advances, it may very well be our most important source of electricity. Technology frequently provides new ways to both generate and store energy. Storage, in particular, may in the future make intermittent renewable energy sources reliable and cost-effective to compete with traditional energy generation. But until then, we need to proceed cautiously so that ratepayers are not burdened for the foreseeable future by the costly choices made today. Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Robert Rand, who's an acoustics engineer, and he has expertise, as I said before, in industrial noise control. Robert, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Thank you, Congressman, for the opportunity to speak today about offshore wind development. I'm the owner of Rand Acoustics LLC. I bring over 4 decades of expertise in acoustics, including industrial noise control, numerous environmental impact assessments, and 10 years with the Noise and Vibration Group at Stoner Webster Engineering Corporation. There, I worked on noise and vibration controls for power plants, industrial, and large commercial projects, managing noise control budgets up to 8 figures. I'm a member of the Acoustical Society of America and a member emeritus of the Institute of Noise Control Engineering. Growing up on the coast of Maine, I messed around on boats, and I've been involved in sonar noise impact analysis since 1999, when I researched the impacts of naval sonar noise on whales. In 2023, I recorded the calls of vibrant, healthy humpback whale populations in Hawaii, and off Cape Cod, the sparse calls of the depleted, endangered North Atlantic right whales. With increasing reports of whale and dolphin deaths along the eastern seaboard, in May of 2023, I measured underwater sound levels from a wind industry sonar survey vessel operating 43 nautical miles off our coast here. In November of 2023, I measured underwater sound levels from pile driving operations 14 miles southwest of Nantucket. I received no outside funding for this work and extend my deep appreciation to the boat captains and trip coordinators who made those surveys possible. The technical reports are freely available on my website at randacoustics.com/papers. These surveys provide what I believe are the first independent, calibrated measurements of offshore wind industry sonar and pile driving underway off the eastern seaboard. The results are troubling and cast doubt on the federal commitment to protecting marine species from harm. The wind industry sonar sparker bang bang sounds underwater were measured 16 dB louder than the substitute sound levels NOAA approved in permitting. Well, what does that mean? Those deficient proxy levels allowed the developer to use short distances for species monitoring and mitigation actions. The noise impact on marine species outside those short distances is unquantified. Wind industry pile driving hammer blows, even with NOAA's required noise mitigation technologies, was measured at levels as loud as seismic air guns used for geophysical oil and gas exploration. This is shockingly loud. These underwater pile driving hammer blows are comparable to blasts from a 155 millimeter howitzer cannon in the air. Such noise blasts are far too loud to be permitted anywhere near whale habitat. Next, we have the continuous noise from propulsion and dynamic positioning DP thrusters used to keep the vessels in place while they're working. It appears from reviewing multiple wind industry authorizations that specifically for offshore wind, the National Marine Fisheries Service, or NMFS, has abandoned its protective behavioral harassment threshold of 120 dB reference to 1 micropascal. Now that's technical, but you can ask me about that later. Established in 2005 to prevent impacts from continuous intrusive noise. NMFS doesn't regulate it. Continuous noise generated by vessel propulsion and DP thrusters significantly surpasses the federal threshold for behavioral harassment, with noise levels exceeding 120 out beyond 6 kilometers from the activity. That's nearly 44 square miles of continuous behavioral harassment for each pile being driven. The proposed South Coast project, southwest of Nantucket, predicts a radius of over 42 kilometers in summer and 84 kilometers in winter for continuous vibratory pile driving exceeding 120 dB. This represents an astounding and unprecedented level of noise pollution that will contaminate the marine environment from shore to open ocean with continuous behavioral harassment. In noise control planning, we consider environmental noise burden. That's the adverse impact of noise on the environment. Species communication, locational awareness, and detection of predators and prey. Noise burden is recognized as worsening survival challenges. The right whale impact classification is major, the highest risk class. That's before additional offshore development. In 2016, NOAA classified vessel strikes and noise as high threats to whale species. Offshore wind development introduces high threat noise to marine species and poses a significant risk of behavioral and hearing impact to endangered species that are already burdened by noise in the oceans where they live and need quiet to communicate and survive. Right whale numbers have diminished significantly in the last 6 to 8 years and cannot bear additional noise burden. Permitting additional noise burden on the critically endangered and dwindling North Atlantic right whale arguably serves only to accelerate its slope toward extinction. This situation raises concerns about compliance with the Marine Mammal Protection Act and the Endangered Species Act. The noise burden permitted by federal authorizations since 2016 has made it harder, not easier, for endangered species to survive. Everyone can agree on that. Yet the noise impact on species allowed under TAKE's authorization for noise pollution remains unquantified. Developers estimate the numbers affected using models, and permits are issued for takes deemed acceptable to avoid species depletion. However, it is impossible to accurately quantify the actual number of marine mammals and other species killed or adversely impacted due to noise impacts on hearing, migration, and communication. Now we see confirmation in research published in August 2023 that dolphin hearing loss occurs at low-frequency sound levels far below the auditory threshold exposure function used by NOAA. Well, what does that mean? It means that harmful acoustic energy is reaching the inner ear as mechanical stress on the inner ear cells, regardless of whether the mammal can hear it. Dolphins can be losing their hearing and not know it's happening. One possible explanation is that marine mammal body density is about the same as water. Pile driving booms and low-frequency continuous noise penetrate through into the inner ear of the marine mammal, regardless of the auditory threshold. To be conservative, we should assume this is occurring for the endangered cetacean species as well, for which hearing loss exposure functions have not yet been obtained. However, for some reason, NOAA has retained low-frequency hearing exposure filtering for endangered cetaceans in its models, which allows developers to use reduced distances for mitigation ranges. My final point today relates to blade failure. A 57-ton blade on Vineyard Wind turbine AW38 broke off on July 13, about 20 meters from the hub. The wind facility was shut down by the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, or BSEE, or BSEE. GE is investigating the so-called root cause. Beaches have been shut down. Blade shards and debris continues to wash up weeks later on shores along many miles of the East Coast. There is an underlying design flaw related to excessive blade noise that I have investigated at onshore wind facilities that would affect other installed blades with possible failures. Rotating the long multi-ton wind turbine blades repetitively through large changes in height with high wind shear, that's changes in wind speed, may exceed design specifications. Add in low-level jetting and boundary layering, which occur generally between sunset and sunrise, all with sudden changes in wind speed and direction. The blades are subjected to sudden forces, displacement, and jolts that may greatly exceed design specs. This problem was identified by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in 2002. As noted by University of Colorado PhD professor Julie Lundquist in 2010, 14 years ago, although large wind turbines are designed to IEC standards turbines regularly experience extreme wind inflow events outside the limits defined by those standards. Breaching design limits is a serious issue requiring safety margins that, to my knowledge, are not addressed or required in permits. Repetitive stress accelerates fatigue to failure, and sudden extreme stresses provoke sudden failures. Everyone can understand that. It's important to critically evaluate assurances from manufacturers, developers, and regulators that the blade failure problem has been fully identified and resolved. Achieving significant design safety margins in manufacturing, mandated by federal oversight, would represent a credible response. In conclusion, there are serious concerns about whether the federal agencies responsible for protecting marine species and the environment are effectively managing the noise and failure impacts associated with offshore wind projects. Accurately quantifying the actual noise impact on species within a project's working timeframe appears to be unworkable. Moreover, cumulative impact assessments of multiple projects underway simultaneously appear to be lacking in project take authorizations. The AW38 blade failure underscores the catastrophic risks involved, and the absence of a formal emergency response plan for such failures is particularly concerning. While I believe that most individuals within these federal agencies are genuinely committed to protecting marine species and the environment, there are concerns that the process for approving and accelerating offshore wind development may not fully account for the demonstrated risk to endangered species and the environment. Additionally, the challenge remains that it is essentially impossible to quantify noise impacts on these species. This situation underscores the critical need for independent external oversight to ensure that environmental protection remains a genuine priority and that endangered species receive the top priority they are entitled to by law. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you.
We have Amy Debio, and she's a Nantucket community leader and a leader in general, and she's gonna tell us what happened. Amy.
Thank you, Congressman, for inviting me here to testify about the threat offshore wind poses to the environment, the economy, and our electric bills. My name is Amy Debio, and I'm a board member of Act for Whales, the grassroots, nonpartisan Nantucket Green Group. For years, the offshore wind companies, most of whom I might add are owned or co-owned by foreign energy companies, have told us that offshore wind is safe, clean, great for fighting global warming, no threat to the environment, and will cut our electric bills. None of this is true, as we have painfully seen over the past month in Nantucket. In July, a 100-yard-long blade snapped off a Vineyard wind turbine, a turbine as tall as the Eiffel Tower, right off Nantucket. It scattered sharp and jagged, potentially toxic pieces of blade across hundreds of miles of ocean and beaches in Massachusetts and Rhode Island. So far, more than 6 truckloads of debris have been collected on Nantucket's beaches alone. Goodness knows what's still traveling in the water column or polluting the bottom of the ocean off our shores still now. To add insult to injury, Vineyard Wind kept everyone, including our local government, in the dark for nearly 2 days after the blade failure. In fact, they really didn't speak up at all until the first debris started washing ashore. It's bad enough their blade broke, but they shouldn't have sat on that news for nearly 2 days. The danger posed was so great that the Nantucket harbor master shut down the island's beaches, a federal agency slapped a suspension on the Vineyard Wind project, the Massachusetts DEP launched an investigation, and a Native American tribe demanded a moratorium on offshore wind. Act for Whales and Green Oceans in Rhode Island have also called for moratoriums. This crisis should have been a wake-up call for everyone, especially since the environmental impact statements for these projects concede that offshore wind will not materially affect climate change. Despite this, you still have offshore wind cheerleaders calling for even more offshore wind. In Massachusetts, Governor Maura Healey is still repeating the false claims that offshore wind will reduce electric bills. Here in New Jersey, instead of heeding offshore wind's version of 3 Mile Island, Governor Phil Murphy has instead doubled down, announcing the acceleration of the state's offshore wind solicitation schedule. 2 years ago, Act for Whales sued the federal government to stop the Vineyard Wind project. We sued because the project is a threat to our ocean, beaches, the endangered right whales, and other sea life, as well as a threat to our historic island. There are fewer than 350 North Atlantic right whales still living. The cumulative effect of building thousands of offshore wind turbines is that they could decimate this critically endangered and important species. We're about to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court. We need them to cut through the catch-22 merry-go-round that the federal agencies and the lower courts have put us through. We sued these agencies because they failed to actually do their jobs and look at the evidence that said offshore wind would be a disaster. The lower courts hid behind the now discredited Chevron deference to say, we can't second-guess the agencies, we're sure they did the right thing. But they didn't, and now our counsel are preparing our cert petition. In the meantime, risk abounds anywhere offshore wind is being planned, built, or operated. The Vineyard Wind blade that snapped wasn't a one-off. 2 months ago, Europe's Dogger Bank wind farm reported a damaged blade that forced restrictions on the immediate marine areas. 9 months ago, Wind Power Monthly reported that a turbine blade at a wind farm in Germany broke after a similar incident the prior year. These are just a few examples, but there are plenty more that have been documented. In fact, it turns out an estimated 3,800 blades fail a year worldwide. It is not a question of if, but when the Nantucket crisis is repeated. Maybe even off of the Jersey Shore, where offshore wind will be built only 8.7 miles off the coast, closer than any other project. Let's do the math. If just 15 blades fell into the ocean each year, and with the thousands of turbines planned for the East Coast, that's a very low number. It would mean almost 1,000 tons of epoxy, fiberglass, and foam contaminating our beaches and ocean every year. For comparison, a 747 weighs 200 tons. Do we want the debris equivalent of 5 jumbo jets breaking into 1 million pieces and polluting our waters every year? The Nantucket blade was made by GE Vernova, which has admitted to a manufacturing defect. As Reuters reported last month, GE Vernova is not the only company making blades that break. Siemens Gamesa has also had quality issues with its wind power turbines after a spate of failures. Again, it's really not a question of if, but when the next blade snaps. It could happen off LBI, Brigantine, Ocean City, Maryland next. But what is most shocking is that this is a disaster that the government never even considered. Look at the government's and the developers' environmental assessments. They don't mention, let alone deal with the possibility that a blade could fail and litter the ocean with potentially dangerous debris. We should all be asking ourselves, what else have they not considered? The only way offshore wind exists is because of the extraordinarily huge subsidies the federal government gives them. Congress needs to step in, stop the madness, and shut down these projects. I implore you, pull the plug on offshore wind subsidies until safety can be assured, and offshore wind companies, often owned by foreign energy companies, can prevent the killing of whales and other marine life, prevent damaging local industries like New Jersey's $40 billion a year tourism industry, and guarantee with their money offsets to any higher electricity prices caused by offshore wind. I applaud you, Congressman, for taking a leadership role on this and for asking the right questions. Thank you deeply. Please, please help stop the offshore wind madness.
So just before we go on to Megan, I just want that to sink in. Everybody to really understand, right here at your Jersey Shore, you are going to have the largest industrial complex of wind turbines in the world, and the tallest. Let that sink in for a minute. Right here in your beloved Brigantine, Mayor. This is real stuff. Megan Lapp, fill us with the knowledge that is in your head. We're glad to have you here today. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Congressman, for the honor of speaking today. My name is Megan Lapp, and I represent Seafreeze, a commercial fishing company based in Rhode Island. I have spent thousands of hours over the past 10 years dealing with offshore wind. Today, I want to focus on two things: financial assurance waivers for offshore wind power plants and a summary of current status. BOEM assures the public that offshore wind developers are required to post decommissioning bonds for their projects to ensure removal of the project at end of life. But the truth is that BOEM habitually grants waivers or departure requests for these financial assurances. In fact, every project constructed or under construction in federal waters off New England have received these waivers: Vineyard Wind, South Fork Wind Farm, and Revolution Wind. New England Wind off Massachusetts has also received a waiver, and U.S. Wind off the coast of Maryland has submitted a pending departure request. Waivers claim that requiring the financial assurance is an unnecessary and unreasonable financial burden on the company, and that requiring decommissioning financial assurance before project construction is unnecessarily burdensome for lessees. BOEM therefore defers the decommissioning bond requirement until the projects are 15 years into their 20-year power purchase agreements with the states. This stands in stark contrast to BOEM's recently enacted changes to financial assurance requirements for oil and gas industry decommissioning, which included new financial risk assessments and higher levels of supplemental bonding up front. BOEM's rationale for these changes was protection of the U.S. taxpayer. In fact, its announcement proposing the stricter requirements read, "BOEM proposes stronger financial assurance requirements for offshore oil and gas industry to protect taxpayers from being forced to pay decommissioning costs." And when the rule was finalized in April 2024, the Secretary of the Interior stated, "The American taxpayer should not be held responsible when oil and gas companies are unable to clean up after their own operations." They offer no rationale why the American taxpayer shouldn't be protected from the same for offshore wind. One reason listed for approving the Vineyard Wind departure request was use of proven wind turbine technology, even though the project was planning on using a turbine model larger than any previously installed, which had never been tested in the ocean. The recent Vineyard Wind blade crisis off Nantucket, where one of the Vineyard Wind turbine blades snapped and has been producing debris, safety hazards, and significant impacts to local economies for weeks, only underscores this lack of foresight and BOEM's political push for offshore wind, regardless of cost to American taxpayers. If a decommissioning bond is a financial hardship for developers, what of the cost of cleanup, liability, and damages to local economies, businesses, and citizens? With such disasters not unprecedented, will the companies remain long enough for the decommissioning bond to be posted 15 years from now? For blade failures alone, an offshore wind insurer reported in 2014 that out of 700,000 blades operating globally at that time, an average of 3,800 blades failed each year, from causes ranging from lightning damage to human error and manufacturing defect. At that rate, should the U.S. have 3,000 turbines off the East Coast, we can expect an average of 48 blade failures per year. Will the financial liability for damages to coastal communities from this type of incident cause offshore wind companies to fold before the decommissioning bond is required 15 years into project operations, leaving U.S. taxpayers on the hook for decommissioning? It's a question that needs to be asked. Notably, offshore wind manufacturers are already dodging warranty costs for 2- to 3-year-old U.S. wind projects on land, where turbines have suffered repeated failures, including blade liberation events and delamination. Meanwhile, the Coast Guard and FAA have refused to analyze or even comment on the implications of offshore wind-induced radar interference on their own operations, as well as commercial and private maritime and air traffic, even though they did so for the proposed Cape Wind project back in the 2000s. Today, both agencies take a policy position giving BOEM complete and final say over all issues that could compete with offshore wind development, thereby putting American lives at risk. For example, the developer of the Atlantic Shore South project off New Jersey has stated that 114 of its 195 turbines would exceed FAA obstacle clearance heights for Atlantic City Airport, requiring changes to the altitudes usable by air traffic control for managing aircraft. But the FAA restricted its analysis of height impacts and associated action to within 12 nautical miles from shore, to only 44 of the 114 interfering turbines. It defers to BOEM outside of 12 miles, even though its own air traffic control charts extend well beyond the lease area. Simply because some of the turbines are located outside of 12 miles, does that mean that the conflicts disappear or don't exist? Of course not. At the same time, multiple citizens groups have organized coastwide from Massachusetts to Virginia to fight offshore wind in the wake of having their interests ignored and overruled by BOEM. Municipal entities pushing back against offshore wind cable approvals through their towns have either had home rule taken away or been forced into dispute resolution by their respective states, in addition to being sued by the offshore wind developers themselves. The massive suppression of local opposition to offshore wind by federal and state governments has led to lawsuits by the commercial fishing industry and residents of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia to various projects. Even historic preservation societies and municipalities have joined in the fight. Ironically, now that offshore wind is being proposed along the Gulf Coast, NOAA is mailing surveys to coastal citizens of Louisiana to better understand community concerns with offshore wind, including impacts to fishing, navigation, and water quality. Where was the same consideration when projects were being approved up and down the East Coast? What we have seen here is an across-the-board indifference by federal agencies to the real-life implications of offshore wind on American citizens, whether taxpayers, professional or recreational mariners, airline passengers or pilots, homeowners or municipalities or concerned citizens or environmental advocates. And that is why we are now seeing a groundswell of democracy in action. It is time to take our ocean back. It is time to hold agencies accountable. We are not going to lose the Atlantic. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
So now Congressman Scott Perry and I are going to ask you a few questions, and we'll kind of bounce around. I'll go first, and Scott, we'll go back and forth. Diane, Ms. Solomon, couple thoughts. So you said the cost to bring offshore energy onshore has been shifted to the ratepayer. And this means, I believe it means, but I want to hear it from your mouth, that New Jersey residents will pay more to ensure the profit incentive for offshore wind companies. And if they are going to pay more in their utility bills, any sense of how much more?
Yeah. Because of the way the offshore winds companies get their VIG, shall we say, is similar to the way solar companies are paid. They issue regs for each megawatt of energy that's supplied, and those regs have to be purchased by the electric providers and then get put into your bills. The cost of those recs are 3, 5, 7. Right now we don't know. It's just based upon the rec currently, though those costs are not the all-in costs. Okay, that's what they're saying it's going to be today, but there's other costs that could affect the OREC price. And there's an inflationary clause within the agreement allowing them to charge up to 50% more to cover those costs. And it's been my experience that anytime you give a provider the ability to make 15% more, let me tell you, they make 15% more. Somehow that gets worked into
Solomon,
the price.
that's 15% on top of.
On top of, yes, the current price.
So would I be correct in saying that utility bills look like they're going to rise significantly because of this?
Oh, yeah, not initially, not until they start producing power, because they don't get to charge the ratepayers until the energy is actually being produced. The RECs do not get produced. But once they come online and those RECs start to be issued, then it'll be rolled into your bills. Yes.
Okay. Is Atlantic Shores currently seeking additional tax or ratepayer subsidies that you're aware of?
I'm not aware that they are. I have to look at their agreements. Initially, especially with the Ocean Wind project, when they found out that it was not sustainable for them to proceed with the under the original agreement, which returned any investment tax credit to the ratepayers when they lost that ability, and after the COVID and inflationary changes, there was a request to have that tax credit revert to the wind producer. That was something, frankly, I, along with some other commissioners, insisted upon when we first negotiated those contracts, that those investment tax credits would be returned to the ratepayer.
So let me just jump in for a second, just so people understand what Ms. Solomon is saying. Because your rates, and I can say it in very plain English, your utility rates are going to go up a lot, they were going to give you some sort of a subsidy. They were going to help out. And these credits were going to go to the individual ratepayer to help them out because of the costs. But in New Jersey, in its infinite wisdom, decided rather than do that, that the projects were costing so much, particularly Orsted at the time, that they would take that away from the ratepayer and give that, even to that, they would give to the company. That's unbelievable. It was there for you to help a little. By the way, it wouldn't have taken care of it all.
No.
You'd still be paying a lot more. But even that, from them.
The subsidy came, from them selling the energy back into the grid. What they would recover through selling the energy into the grid was supposed to be returned to the ratepayer. But because of the cost to build the project, they needed additional funds in order to make it profitable for them. And frankly,
There's no
understandably
limit
so.
to what they can get.
Yeah. So that was a provision we were trying to include to protect the ratepayer. So then when the subsequent solicitations went out, in order to make it more likely to have more bids on the projects, they put in the 15% inflationary adjustment should they need additional funds in order to make the projects profitable. So that's where that inflationary clause, because that wasn't in the original agreement, that came in subsequent agreements, and that's currently within the...
To the best of your recent knowledge, when somebody's allowed to increase the 15%, how many incidents were they say, no, thank you, that would be too much?
Right.
It's not gonna happen.
You have this with our, utility companies today with the respect to projects, whether they be for reliability or things they want to invest in. There's always additional costs up to a certain amount. I've never seen them not get up to that certain amount.
And last thing, then we'll go to Congressman Perry. This is something you voted against. That's something else I want people to understand. The city of Ocean City, right in Cape May County, they wanted to do infrastructure, go right through the city, because they got to tie these things in somewhere, whether it's Egg Harbor Township in Atlantic County, whether it was through Ocean City in Cape May County, in each county, in each area, they've got to tie these things in offshore, not just the ones that are on the water, but actually in the mainland. And so Ocean City said, we don't want to do it. And it goes against our zoning, our code, whatever, we don't want to do it. And they came in and they said, we're going to, what's the word I want to use? Yeah, not by eminent domain, but we are going to say that you've got to do it whether you want to or not. We're going to force it upon you that your local zoning, your local codes, your local taxpayers, your local voters do not matter. And we're going to put this stuff in here anyhow. I've never heard, that's unbelievable. Think about that. Your town doesn't want something, the governing body doesn't want it, the people don't want it, the zoning doesn't allow for it, but they go for it anyhow. And it was against local control. And there was a decision that was made by BPU. You voted against it. You voted against that decision. Can you explain why?
Yeah. It's a little bit more complicated than that. There was legislation.
Everything's a little more complicated.
Yeah.
I like to really boil it down, but you're right.
Yeah. The New Jersey State Legislature made it possible for local communities to, and there are local zoning laws, to be overridden by making application to the BPU if we felt that it was in the public's interest to override those local ordinances. Now, in all honesty, there's similar provisions when putting in a gas line or other types of utility infrastructure. So that precedent was has been in effect for a long time. However,
they did one specifically for wind, though.
yeah, they did it specifically for wind, which differs for other types of utility investment because you've already made a determination that that is in the public's interest, and to, frankly, when you put in that utility infrastructure, it generally means you're going to pay lower prices eventually for bringing that energy to your home. So there's been some benefit that's been determined ahead of time in allowing us to override, or there's some safety concern that we've been able to determine in allowing such a project. My problem with the application from the two municipalities, number one, is that we kept that matter in-house at the Board of Public Utilities in terms of investigating the concerns of the local municipalities. Generally, we would, any contested matter, we would send to the Office of Administrative Law to put together a record to allow for a full hearing. And that was not done in this particular case. And the transparency of allowing for that full record to be completed and presented to the, then it's presented to the BPU for us to make our determination, was not done. And that was the force of my objection, was that we did not treat this as we would any contested matter to fully explore the reasonableness of the application being made by the wind developer.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon. And that's with all this project in general, everything that we've done is always rushed through, pushed through.
Exactly.
And just, we don't have to go by previous precedent. It's just, it's wind, so we've got to do it.
Did I say that all right, Ms. Kate May over here? Yeah, thank you.
Congressman Perry.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Congressman Van Drew. I'm going to start on the other side of the panel with Megan. I learned something in the back, and I think you might have learned it from her testimony today, but to make this plain to people that don't live on the coast. So I live in central Pennsylvania. Now, just north of me, we have a lot of old coal mines. And the miners came, they mined the coal. A lot of them went out of business and just left. And they left what we call stripping piles, or strippings. They strip out the coal, and you got a big hole in the earth that fills with water and then junk cars or what have you, and it's there. And nobody kind of owns it. Nobody doesn't own it. Nobody wants it, but it's there, so on and so forth. Mining companies are gone hundreds of years ago. We have acid mines. Once the certain soil is exposed, it's literally acidic. It becomes acidic, and then it gets into the creek. It turns it red. Nothing can live in it, and it's just there. The companies, they're long, long gone. And as a former contractor, I know that we had to provide what's called a performance bond. When you got the job, you had to buy insurance that said you're going to perform the work, and if you don't, for some reason, you get sick and die, you can't do it, what have you, that there's money set aside for somebody to come in and finish the job. And so what Megan was telling me is that these folks that are constructing these, I think I understand this correctly, and I want to be conversational with you. I heard your testimony was pretty complete, but just conversationally, they're given a waiver, so they don't have to provide the bond until maybe 15 years later. And you also, I think, told me, or somebody told me, that a lot of these companies that are doing this, they're foreign, but they have an LLC that actually does the work. So LLC is limited liability. So they're limiting their exposure. But more to the point, I don't know if you know, Megan, what the cost of one of these Eiffel Tower size things is. What is the cost of one? But after 15, 20 years or whatever, blades thrown off or whatnot, and you got to decommission, you got to tear it apart and either replace it or just get rid of it or whatever. The bond is supposed to pay for that if the company no longer exists, or if the company is sued out of existence, the LLC is sued out of existence, the money's gone, right? We already paid, the ratepayers paid, the facility is built, now we're just collecting money, and at the end, when the returns aren't coming in, to decommission it. Do I have this correct, that no one's going to be there to decommission? No one's going to be there to tear it apart and throw it on the junk heap? Are there taxpayers like in Pennsylvania? And oh, by the way, New Jersey residents pay for mine reclamation, not only in Pennsylvania, but around the country. Are we going to do the same thing with this? Is that what you're saying?
It sure looks like it. You're right. Normally, for energy projects, and what BOEM has told us for years, as we've had public meetings about offshore wind for years, and you ask the question, they say, well, don't worry, there's going to be a decommissioning bond that the developer has to post at the beginning so that there's money later on to take the project out. Now, I remember in some of the earlier documents, they actually had wording in some of them that alluded to, well, maybe we won't take them out. Maybe we'll just leave them there. They can be artificial reefs. And that language, I think, was later taken out, but I remember seeing it in some of the earlier documents. But the current documents say that decommissioning is essentially construction in reverse. Well, construction costs are in the billions. And for the vessels that they need, I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars a day. So think about that, but however many years down the road with, you know, inflation and things like that, like what does that number look like? It's a lot of money. But if they're not required to post it until, you know, 15 years from now, a lot of what these offshore wind companies will do is they do what they call farm downs, where they build the project, they get the investable tax credits, and then they sell the project off, you know, to somebody else later on. So that company is now gone. And you're right, they are LLCs. If there are massive, you know, issues like the Nantucket blade failure, if they get, you know, class action lawsuits and lawsuits from municipalities and things like that for damages, well, if the rationale for giving them the waiver is that they're not financially stable enough at this present time to post the bond, well, if they have a rash of lawsuits after them, are they going to be financially stable after that? And if they're an LLC, if they can just cut and run, then, you know, then it looks like it's there for the American taxpayer.
Curiosity, just out of curiosity, because it was in somebody's testimony here, there's apparently a different or disparate, as we call it, disparate treatment between different kind of energy companies. If we look at something more traditional like gas and oil exploration, do they have to post a bond, and when do they have to post the bond for cleanup or closing the wellhead after use or what have you, versus wind? And if there is a difference, why is there a difference?
Well, yes, they absolutely do have to post a bond, and they made those stricter this year. They have to post new supplemental bonding up front. They have to provide financial information to BOEM that says, you know, we're stable enough to do X, Y, and Z. And the rationale was so that the taxpayer doesn't get stuck with it. And that is in an industry that's been around for a long time in the U.S. We kind of know what to expect with that. But with this, the same agency is playing by two different sets of rules. There is no consistency in agency management. BOEM oversees all offshore energy, and they are not applying the rules equally. But when it comes to offshore wind, it's a much riskier thing because, number one, we don't have it yet. Number two, we see all these projects saying, oh, well, we're backing out of our power purchase agreements because the economics don't work for us anymore. They're doing things like trying to reclaim the money that was supposed to go to the citizens of New Jersey. Now, things like blades snapping is happening. It's a much riskier financial investment. So you would think that it would cost a lot more upfront in bonding. You would think that, considering the fact that you're not just talking about one oil rig, but you're talking about hundreds of wind turbines, that number would be higher because it's probably going to cost a lot more to remove hundreds of wind turbines than one oil well. So you would think that the agencies would err on the side of caution and making sure that they have that money set aside. But that's not what we're seeing.
Okay, so just to be clear, bonding, if you're not familiar with bonding, is like buying insurance. It's called bonding for whatever reason, but you're essentially buying an insurance policy. Insurance is based on risk. And what Megan's saying is that the risk is higher because it's a new industry and we don't know all these things, but yet the insurance costs, so to speak, are lower, or actually, in this case, non-existent for the wind companies. I'll turn it back over to you, Jeff.
Hey, that's a good point. Again, the taxpayers are going to be the one at risk. This is not only is this bad for the environment, it is a bad fiscal. These are bad fiscal projects. Robert Rand, in plain English, that even I can understand. You know I love you. Do you have documented cases of offshore wind companies, I'm going to say it, breaking the law? In other words, going beyond the legal limit of sound? I've had long discussions with you about this where, you know, your belief is because they were so much louder than should be allowed, that is truly what affected the whales. But do you have any documented instances of that? Or could you tell us about that? What you found? I know there was a big difference when you listened to the whales, I believe it was here along the East Coast, as compared to Hawaii, and the communications they had with each other.
Yeah, well, there are two things that I hear you asking about, and the first thing is, do we have documented, quantified data and information about real impacts on the endangered species, on the ESA species? And that's a really tough thing to do because we can't instrument them. We're not following them around. Most of the time we don't see them, and so.
Ways louder than it should have been.
Well, in both cases, of both the sonar and the pile
Explain
driving.
just that little piece there, how loud it was in comparison and what effect that could have and how that's beyond the limits that are supposedly established by the agency.
Yeah, the levels that I measured were 16 decibels louder. That's what we can do is convert that to distance, and that's over 4 times farther the distance would be needed to protect the species compared to what was used in the permit. So that's over 16 to 20 times the area that would have had to be monitored. So it's a big difference, and so that part that's what I think I call that an irregularity, but it's a problem. And the main problem, it is very, very difficult to figure out what's actually happened to individual members of the species, what's actually happened to the species as a whole. Most of it is estimated. Before the project started, it's all modeled. The models make assumptions about where the species are in the water. Those assumptions may look reasonable on paper, but there's no way to evaluate them in the water. So there's a kind of a fundamental disconnect between what the agencies are doing with models and what's actually happening in the water, because there's no way to figure it out. We don't really know how many thousand fish have been killed by the pile driving. It's just impossible to track it. We don't really know what the effect has been on a behavioral harassment on the whales because it's really hard to track. This research that I mentioned on the dolphin hearing, one of the findings they had was that the behavior of the dolphins did not match the hearing loss that they measured. So if you sort of look at that in plain English, you could have an observer looking at a dolphin, you wouldn't be able to tell if they were being injured or not because their behavior doesn't match. In this research, it didn't match what they were measuring. So these are huge problems in terms of managing the impact on the species. And there may be assertions from the agencies that they can manage it. From my point of view and looking at the effect of the noise, I'm not seeing how they can do that. I'm just not seeing how they can do that. The takes authorizations for individual projects, if you look at all the species, are up in the thousands, maybe in tens of thousands for if you lump all the species together. And there's just no way to track all that. So the way the system is built is that models are developed. They're very carefully developed with lots of very carefully reasoned assumptions. But when it gets right down to it, when they're running, I don't see any way that it's actually being quantified after the fact. And that, aside from what I measured, which showed that the levels were much louder than allowed in the permit, this basic disconnect between the modeling and what's actually happening in the water, to me, looks like a very serious problem of regulation. It's a very serious problem.
Robert, that's the important part to me. The noise, what they were allowing, was much louder than was allowed in the permit.
Right.
They were making a lot more noise in the ocean than they should have been allowed to do. And the reason that those assumptions are made in the permit that you can only make so much noise is based upon not hurting those species. And they're
That's
not
right.
even sure of that. That's guesswork. So this is all guesswork. But even with the guesswork, they went way beyond the limit that you should go. That's the point.
That's what I found when I looked at the authorizations for that vessel that I measured. Didn't match up at all. And I also measured sonars operating up around 19 to 33 kilohertz, which is ultrasonic for us, and those aren't even in the permit. And two of those sonar, there are four of them, two of those sonars are impulsive and should have been in the permit because they evaluate impact on species based for the impulsive sources, but those were not in there.
So, you know, supposedly we care about the environment, these folks, these regulatory agencies, not really. That's my point. I said that. So, Amy, so what's going on in Nantucket? Is there community anger about this? Are people starting to realize maybe this wasn't such a good idea? Just can you give us a sense of
Sure.
what's happening?
Yeah, I would say, by the way, this is a piece of the blade that washed up on a beach near my home that I brought down yesterday. And there were hundreds of pieces that looked like that, pieces that were larger. And I actually think the more troubling ones are the ones that are so small that you can't see them. They're in the water column, and our animals are surely eating them, and that's building into the food chain. So that's just as an aside. One of the things, it's been very difficult to get everyone on Nantucket and in Massachusetts in general on board with what is coming. And you're probably seeing that here in New Jersey and everywhere else. And I think there's two main reasons for that, but they're tied together. The big reason is that there's been a very strategic effort by the wind companies to shut down opposition. And so they have been very strategic. They have paid off many, I shouldn't use the words paid off, but they have made donations to many tried and true organizations that we all seem to love that should be protecting the environment. So whether it's the Sierra Club, whether it's Mass Audubon or any of the big aquariums, even many universities have been paid off. So it's been a slow burn trying to get people to understand because we're just not hearing it. And that actually goes for a lot of media outlets also who have accepted donations. So it's been hard getting the story out. But the blade break really, Congressman, really changed the attitude of people on Nantucket. Everybody is concerned. And we just can't even keep up with the amount of emails and phone calls that we're getting. Really, it's been an incredible shift. The beaches were a disaster. The residents are concerned. The year-round residents are very concerned. It's a tourism-driven economy, and when you shut beaches, that's a disaster. You know, we don't need people to cancel their vacations and their restaurant reservations, and the surf schools, had 25 instructors sitting on a beach that were actually picking up debris instead of collecting money from tourists coming in to take advantage of their surf lessons. So it's been really impactful to the island, and I would say that probably the number one thing that people are starting to understand is what several of us mentioned in our testimony. What's the goal? If the goal for these projects is to fix climate change, then show us in the documents where this is actually going to move the needle on that. And I think for now, the public is really beginning to ask that question. I think it's the most important question we can ask. If this isn't moving the needle on anything, then why are we destroying the environment to do it?
And I'm going to turn this over to Scott in a second, but one thing that you said struck me, and many things actually, but something that I think you all know. One of the harshest parts of this is how much money these companies have spread around. Quite frankly, they've bought advertisements in a lot of media. They try to convince municipalities to work with them and promise them all kinds of financial benefits. You have to, like our good mayor here in Brigantine realizes that they could get some short-term benefit financially, long-term, not only hurting the environment, hurting tourism, but it's going to hurt financially as well. And particularly, and again, I know I speak kind of plain, but I'm a believer. I'm a believer in America and what we do, and it's been harsh for me to see so many organizations, many of which my wife is a member of. I'm not going to name them, but that we've all contributed to. And we see that just large sums of money were given to them, and they haven't spoken out about this. And I remember the days years and years ago. I was a county commissioner, called a freeholder then, and we had a demonstration on the boardwalk. I believe it was in Ocean City. And it was over the fact that some had spoken about having offshore, Michael, you remember this, offshore drilling actually off the coast of New Jersey. Now, I'm a conservative. I believe in using our own energy. I believe in a lot. Offshore drilling doesn't belong off the coast of New Jersey. It just doesn't. But we all came together, Republican, Democrat, nobody cared, independent. We said, man, this is bad. There's potential loss here. It's going to hurt tourism, hurt fishing, all the things we talked about with this. It's just not the right thing. There are areas that want it. There are areas that are good. It's not here. We all came together, and it never happened. It's not a good area for it anyhow. But this has been different. Something that's going to harm the environment, and we're not hearing with our environmental partners. And it just makes you wonder. And honestly, to be very candid, it makes me sad to see that and hear that in America today. Anyhow, Congressman Perry, I know you got some more questions.
Sure do, Amy. I'm going to start with you and then turn to Robert. Now, I'm not a whale expert. I don't know. Jeff might be. He seems to be an expert at a lot of things, but he is an expert at a lot of things. But I don't know about whales. But Amy, I think you might be, of those of us sitting here, maybe the most well-versed, if nothing else, at least anecdotally. We don't know because we don't live off Nantucket. I don't live off New Jersey. But do the whales? I know we've seen reports of them washing up on your beaches. They've washed up on New Jersey shores. Do they swim? Do they exist among these facilities out in the ocean?
So the Vineyard Wind Project off Nantucket is the first large-scale wind project that's underway for the United States so far. And I would assume at some point they will, but we saw a lot of whale deaths and strandings. I mean, New Jersey was sort of ground zero for that, and I think it's continued to be. It's been and Robert could probably talk to this, or Megan even more than I can. But when we're seeing these huge mortality events, unusual mortality events as they're called, and we see that they correlate perfectly with all the sonar work that's been done with respect to these projects, you would think that the government agencies would use that as their hypothesis and say there's a very good correlation here between whale deaths and sonar work. Let's make that the hypothesis, prove it wrong. But instead, there's really been very little study going on with any of these animals whatsoever. And even if you do a necropsy on a whale, you can't really detect what its behavior is. I mean, many of you probably have dogs, and I heard this down in Wildwood. I forget who used this analogy. It might have been even Mike Donahue who said it, but I thought it was really poignant. If you have a dog and it hears a loud noise, fireworks, how do most dogs act? They run. They just run in any direction. If you were in a mall or you heard gunshot, you would just run. You're not really looking to where you're running. And we think that that's probably what's happening with these animals, and you're not going to be able to detect that in a necropsy. If your dog ran off your yard and ran into traffic where it never ran, do you blame the driver? It's not bad driving that's our problem, it was the fireworks. So we think that's probably something that should be considered. Whether or not whales will be able to exist out there, I don't know. I think these projects are going to take decades to build. The pile driving, if the sonar work is not enough, the pile driving will be devastating to these animals. Then there's plow driving. You have to bring these cables to shore. It will be a giant construction project off the East Coast for decades. And then they'll have to start potentially decommissioning or, reimagining what they're putting out there.
All right, so with the chairman's indulgence, I'll change my trajectory here a little bit. I want to go to Robert, but then to Megan as well to follow up on that. Robert, we talked a little bit in the back. You learn a lot of these things. So there's a thing called incidental harassment authorization. Think about it. Incidental harassment authorization. As I understand it, Robert, you can tighten me up here. That's the government telling companies that they're allowed to harass the whales or the sea life, even if it makes them deaf to a certain point. They get a permit, as I understand it, to do that. And we talked about pile driving specifically. And sonar specifically, and to have these folks understand what you had me understand, You know, you think about, we have submarines that are out there and they're using sonar to detect numerous things, but as Robert told me, that's passive. So they're receiving signals, not necessarily sending signals, which is different. But what I was really fascinated by is the frequency and the level of noise for the wildlife, for the fish and the mammals that live in the ocean, of the pile driving. Can you kind of describe what that's like for if we were listening to it on here, and how the frequency of how much it would be?
Sure, it would be. It's like a boom. It's like when you saw Jurassic Park, and the dinosaur went like that. That's what it sounds like. And when you're close in, it's got a hard sound, like a big boom, and you get out 4 nautical miles, and it's the whole water area is reverberating. So it's boom like that.
How
And,
often? How often?
About once every 2 seconds, so 30 times a minute.
And so, like I said, I'm not a whale expert. Maybe Megan can tighten me up on this too, but I understand they navigate, they communicate with sounds. And so when you have that...
Sound is essential for survival. It's essential to communicate mother and calf. The right whales communicate very quietly, and it's thought partially because the calves make a good lunch for certain other for killer whales, so they try to talk quietly, not to attract attention. But that's in stark contrast to the humpback whales, who are really quite vocal. But I think part of the quietness is an adaptation of that the species is so depleted. And I'm not a marine biologist, so I can't really talk to that much farther than that. But what I can say is that noise reduces the detectable distance for things. It's the acting distance. So if it's quiet outside, you can hear things a long way away. I mean, in the early morning, you go out on the beach, you might be able to hear someone talk a mile down the beach. You might even be able to hear and understand what they're saying. But as the noise level comes up, or if a boat comes by, well, you might not even be able, you might have to yell to someone standing 6 feet away from you. That's the effect of noise. It reduces the listening radius. So these continuous noises from the vessels that are sitting there running their dynamic positioning thrusters is filling the water with low frequency noise and engine noise, which is like a tonal noise. And then these booms are coming twice a second. Now, for the South Coast, I mentioned vibrating pile driving. That's like a continuous thrumming sound, like a deep kind of like an organ sound, and that'll just go on and on and on for the whole time that they're driving the pile. That vibration sort of gets the pile to settle into the water, and they may use air jets to help loosen up the sand around the bottom, so it keeps going. But that noise is so loud that they're talking about 50 mile distance to get to the behavioral harassment threshold. 50 miles around that operation.
And there could be multiple operations going on simultaneously.
If they get authorization for 2 or 3 boats and have the boats that will do it, I think right now they may have 1, but if they get authorization for 2 or 3, then there would be 2 or 3 doing that.
And I think this is important. You mentioned this in your statement, but to ascribe motive, who paid for your research that you published?
Nobody paid for it. After the trip out to Hawaii and my conversations with people along the coast, I figured, well, who else is going to go out and measure this? I'll go out and measure it.
So no anti-wind people came to Robert and said, hey, look, if you do this, we'll pay for it. He just did it of his own volition. So the point goes that this is just him trying to do the right thing to educate himself and educate us. And I think the point needs to be made. And with the chairman's indulgence, Megan, if you want to weigh in here regarding any of that conversation and whale behavior and proximity.
Yeah, so one thing that I think is very interesting is just kind of like in my testimony when I compared how BOEM is dealing with financial assurances for oil and gas as opposed to offshore wind, I started to look at how the permits for impacts to marine mammals are dealt with by the two different industries, because we've had oil and gas for a long time, right? So I went on NOAA's website and I looked at some of the permits that ExxonMobil has for the Gulf of Mexico. They are using the same equipment, the same make and model for the shallow hazard seismic that the offshore wind companies are using off the East Coast. Same everything. We're not talking deep water exploration seismic. We're talking shallow hazard seismic that offshore wind companies use for determining where to put piles and cables. And the oil industry does it for pipelines and oil rigs. Same equipment, even some of the same vessels, actually. Mm-hmm. When you look at them, the permits that are given to oil and gas say that if there is a live mammal stranding within 50 kilometers of any survey work, it has to immediately shut down. And there can be investigations if NOAA thinks that there could potentially be a correlation between any stranding near or within the vicinity of the survey and the survey. So when you look at the permits that are issued to offshore wind developers, they don't say any of that. Actually, last year, Congressman Van Drew, you were amongst several congressmen demanding a cease to survey activities and an investigation because of all the mammal strandings. And so there's two different playing fields here. There's the same agency is treating two different industries differently for the same activity. And the thing that really makes me think about that with respect to mammals is these permits are issued under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. I'm pretty sure that's a legal liability because the Marine Mammal Protection Act hasn't changed. So if you're going to require one thing from one industry using the same equipment and not the same from another industry using the same equipment, last I checked, the Marine Mammal Protection Act stayed the same. So, and what's interesting is that in the Gulf of Mexico, the primary species that would be potentially impacted are very large dolphin populations. On the East Coast, we're dealing with multiple endangered species of whales. So you would think actually that it would be more stringent on the East Coast than it is in the Gulf, but that's not the case.
Thank you. I yield back.
So I want to thank all of you. You're here because you have a good heart and you want to do the right thing, and we really, truly appreciate it, and the testimony was great. I want to thank all of you as well. I want to thank Congressman Perry for taking the trip out here. You can see why I like him, I think. You better applaud or else he won't come back. But he's coming back. He's coming back. But he's going to make me go to Pennsylvania for something. I know it. I know it's going to happen, which is good, and I'll be glad to do that. Most of all, keep the faith. I know sometimes I sound a little bit, like I said, I was sad about some of the things that are going on. I am, without a doubt. This is real stuff. They are doing the wrong thing. As I started this conversation, I've never seen a project that has so many bad aspects to it ever. But persistence pays off. And you fight hard, and you don't relent, you don't give up, you don't succumb. And I know, I'll speak again because he was nice enough to host this, the mayor of this town refuses to give up, and mayor of many other towns, and county commissioners, and state senators, and assemblymen, and others. We need them all to be on board. And it's every aspect of it, by the way. It's not only what directly happens in the water, because to do what they want in the water, they're going to have to do stuff on the mainland as well. For even those folks that live in mainland communities, it's important to do all that you can, to try as hard as you can to stop any of that from happening. We want to stop them in every single way we can. We have to put a check on them, and we can't be lazy about it, and we can't sit back because we will lose our ocean. And I know with the group of people here, hell, I'm starting to recognize some of you, I really appreciate you being here. And I know, Congressman, you're going to want to say a few words, too, before you're on your trek back to PA.
Well, like I said, I don't have anything scripted. I'm so pleased to be back in New Jersey and be with my good friend and your champion, Jeff Van Drew. We don't live here, and so we defer to you. This is your community. This is your home. It's your livelihoods and your passions. But we think that the wrong thing is happening, and from Pennsylvania, from far away, I talked to your congressman. I don't think that your voices are being considered, quite honestly. If they're not being considered adequately, I just want to see the right thing done by everybody. And if they're not going to listen to you, Jeff and I are going to use the platform that you've given us to demand and to jam your voices down their throat. Yeah. So I'm very grateful for your hospitality and for the care that you have for your community. And I'm going to stand right by your congressman in this fight. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you all for being here. Have a great week.
Thanks, brother. It was
You got it, man.